In the midst of a fragile ceasefire and uneasy calm over the Gaza Strip, Britain's government has placed its immediate focus on implementing the first stage of a comprehensive peace arrangement. One senior official asserted that the work at the moment in relation to the Gaza Strip must be ensuring that all of Phase 1 elements from the 20-point plan are in place. He emphasised that this foundational effort includes the ceasefire holding. It also includes clearly ensuring that aid gets into the Strip. The official underscored that the British priority lies not in debating tomorrow's governance arrangements, but in making sure the ceasefire holds and humanitarian access is delivered at scale. He reinforced, we are very focused on ensuring that the Rafah crossing opens, that the Allenby Bridge crossing opens, and the aid flows in at the scale required. Behind that immediate task lies the broader vision of the peace plan proposed by the United States, a 20-point framework designed to halt fighting in Gaza, release hostages and prisoners, outline a phased withdrawal of military forces, and initiate the reconstruction of the enclave. The first phase is clear: cease hostilities, allow trucks and aid into Gaza. The second phase is more complex. It proposes an international transitional body, a multinational security force, and a governance mechanism to fill the political vacuum once arms are laid down. Commenting on that next phase, the official said there are, of course, a whole set of questions too for Phase 2, including the Board of Peace and who might be on it. And as you say, Tony Blair was mentioned as one of those members. He clarified that his discussion earlier in Egypt had touched on those questions. But he stressed that for now, the priority for the British government is ensuring Phase 1 holds, is implemented in full. And we move on to the important work in the 20-point plan. He reiterated that some of the provisions of the plan, specifically the function of the envisaged security force noted in the plan as the ISF, International Stabilisation Force, require underpinning by a UN Security Council mandate. We support that being underpinned by a Security Council mandate, including a Security Council resolution. He indicated that talks were underway in New York involving Britain's mission, and that the UK was fully engaged in the important work of ensuring the UN Security Council is engaged and part of the efforts to ensure stability in this strip. From London's vantage point, therefore, the immediate task is clear: maintain the ceasefire, reopen crossings, let in aid. These are the non-negotiables. At the same time, the UK is actively preparing for the deeper transformation of Gaza, the handoff of military control, the installation of a new security architecture, and a technocratic or transitional government under international supervision. The official's remarks signal that Britain sees itself as not only a participant in that process, but also as a catalyst in ensuring that the multilateral dimension, especially the UN's role, is not sidelined. The Gaza Strip he mentions likely refers to the buffer zone now being demarcated inside Gaza under the terms of the plan. Often referred to as the yellow line, the demarcation is designed to freeze Israeli forces at a defined boundary, 53% of the enclave according to published maps, and to create space for the next phase. Under the agreement, the Israeli Defense Forces were to withdraw to that line, and aid trucks and humanitarian actors would operate beyond it, the crossings becoming lifelines. One critical crossing is the one at Rafah on the Gaza-Egypt border. It has long been the major entry point for humanitarian aid and people movement. The peace plan stipulates that opening the Rafah crossing in both directions will be subject to the same mechanism implemented under the 19th of January 2025 agreement, and link this to full aid will be immediately sent into the Gaza Strip. For London's government, securing the functioning of that crossing alongside others such as the Allenby Bridge linking Jordan and the West Bank for broader aid flows is central to the success of Phase 1. But the momentum for Phase 2, the deeper structural transformation of Gaza and the regional security architecture will depend on agreements around the Board of Peace and the ISF. The US framework calls for disarmament of Hamas, establishment of a Palestinian police force under multinational supervision, and a transitional body to govern Gaza. In that sense, The United Kingdom's insistence on a UN Security Council mandate is significant. It signals an intention to embed this complex process in a recognised legal framework rather than relying solely on ad hoc arrangements. Yet there are clear challenges ahead, acknowledged by the official. He said, "I won't give a running commentary on where we are precisely, but I can confirm to your viewers that the UK is fully engaged in the important work and part of the efforts to ensure stability in this strip." It is a delicate message. The UK wants to show that it is in the game and serious, but without committing to public step-by-step updates. The emphasis remains firmly on implementation rather than rhetoric. From a diplomatic standpoint, London appears to recognise that failures in previous rounds of talks were tied to weak or absent mechanisms for enforcement, which is why the call for Security Council backing is so prominent. The joint statement of France, Germany and Britain earlier in October also urged the Council to give its full support to the ceasefire plan and its implementation. In sum, the British position is one of tight focus: cement the ceasefire, open aid corridors, prepare the stabilisation architecture, and ensure the UN is front and centre. The real test will come if either side fails to hold up its end of phase one, whether the crossings remain open, whether donors deliver, and whether the security environment stabilises. For Gaza residents, the stakes could not be higher. Years of conflict, siege, displacement and destruction have left civilians in an acute humanitarian emergency. The promise of this 20-point plan is to break that cycle, but the promise depends on delivery, and no actor knows that better than those on the ground. A British government spokesman put it starkly: the crossings must open and the aid must flow. Without those tangible signs, the political architecture cannot be built. If those first steps succeed, London will turn its attention to the more difficult questions of who governs Gaza, how the new security force is composed, and how the concept of a strip free of militarised factions is made real. In that sense, what is being built around Gaza today is not simply a ceasefire, but the scaffolding for a new order, one that will require military, political, humanitarian and donor coordination in tandem. The UK is signalling that it aims to play a leading role in that construction. However, the path remains narrow and fraught. Any breakdown at the crossings, any new outbreak of violence along the guard strip, any delay in aid delivery, and the entire architecture is at risk. As one analyst put it, the plan leaves many details for negotiators to hash out. The question the UK is posing to itself and to its partners is, can peace be constructed from logistics and governance at the same time? Can aid trucks, technical committees and donor pledges coexist with ceasefire monitors, withdrawal lines and early warning triggers for renewed violence? And perhaps most importantly, can multilateral institutions like the UN be robust enough to anchor this effort rather than simply decorate it? In Britain's view, and according to the officials' remarks, the answer is yes, but only if the first phase is completed faithfully and swiftly. Only then can the blueprint for phase two move from paper to implementation. In his words, the priority is ensuring phase one holds is implemented in full. And we move on to the important work in the 20-point plan. He added that Britain supports the envisaged security force being underpinned by a UN Security Council resolution, a legal step that will shape both troop contributions and the legitimacy of the operation. Without that, he implied, the stabilisation architecture will lack anchor. For now, the UK is deploying diplomatic effort both at the UN and in regional capitals such as Cairo and Doha. The official noted that he had discussed some of the phase two issues in Egypt earlier this week. The region remains central to the plan. Egypt controls the Rafah crossing. Qatar and Turkey play brokerage roles, and multiple Arab states have signed on to the 20-point framework. But the transitional governance model remains contested. The framework proposes a technocratic committee for the day-to-day running of Gaza's services, overseen by an international board of peace that would set reconstruction priorities, hold the purse strings and signal the shift away from militarised governance. London appears comfortable with this outline, though emphasises that the details, membership, mandate, financing are yet to be finalised. The official's remarks reflect the fact that the UK sees this not only as a humanitarian or diplomatic exercise, but as an act of stabilisation with security and geopolitical consequences. Getting the guard strip secured, the crossings open, the aid flowing, these are minimum conditions. Once achieved, the leverage shifts to the work of building governance, security and development. The UK hopes to be at the centre of that second act. Still, London is aware of the risks. Previous ceasefires in Gaza collapsed when the exit of troops was postponed, aid was delayed, or Palestinian fighters were left unchecked. The new plan acknowledges those risks explicitly. Analysts note that the most difficult part will be disarming Hamas and preventing the entry of weapons into Gaza, a task for Phase 2, but one whose foundations lie in Phase 1 measures. The UK official did not speculate on timelines or dispute where negotiations currently stand. Instead, his message was clear: deliver the basics, then move on.
In effect, Britain is treating the first phase as the make or break moment. If it fails, the governance mechanisms, the security architecture and the reconstruction model will struggle to proceed.
If it succeeds, Britain and its international partners may have a chance to recalibrate Gaza's future. In concluding his remarks, the official stressed that the UK is engaged and ready. He reiterated, "I can confirm the UK is fully engaged in the important work and part of the efforts to ensure stability in this strip." The emphasis may appear repetitive, but in diplomacy, such repetition often signals commitment. The challenge now for all actors, Israel, Hamas, Egypt, the United States, the UK, the UN, donor states, is to synchronise their efforts around those crossings, those aid flows and that fragile guard strip. The plan may be ambitious, but as the UK's position suggests, its success will hinge on simple deliverables. Open the crossings, let the trucks roll, keep the guns down. Only then will the more complicated tasks of rebuilding, governance and security have a credible shot. For the people of Gaza, this is more than a political exercise, albeit forced by war. This may be the first moment where logistics and governance meet in hope. If the plan does not deliver quickly, the cynicism of years of broken promises will resurface. If it does, the first step towards a different Gaza may yet begin.